exposure to contaminants. So some contaminants have the capacity to accumulate in the food web. So organisms at higher trophic levels end up with higher contaminant levels. And some of these contaminants are also of concern in the Arctic because they can be transported through air currents and through water from their sources in more industrialized regions to Arctic environments. And some of them are, for example, PCBs that were largely used in paints and also to stabilize electronic devices, and also organochlorine pesticides that were used in agriculture to kill pests and also to kill mosquitoes inside people's houses. And examples are chloridanes and DDT. So we had access to some killer whales that were hunted by indigenous communities in Southeast Greenland. And some of these killer whales had marine mammal remains in their stomachs. And we also had access to a couple of stranded killer whales in the Faroe Islands that kind of serve as a control for the contaminant levels in these animals. So we found that overall, sub-adults had higher contaminant levels than adult females, and also males had higher contaminant levels than females. And that was observed both in Southeast Greenland and in the Faroe Islands. But this cannot explain the large difference in contaminant levels between the Southeast Greenland killer whales and the Faroe Islands. As you can see, it's much higher in Southeast Greenland. So we think that this is due to their diet. So in Southeast Greenland, killer whales were feeding on marine mammals, whereas in the Faroe Islands, we think they might have been feeding on fish, and that's why we observe this difference in contaminant levels. Another thing to point out is that contaminants such as PCB were very high and above levels that caused reproductive impairment in other marine mammals in the wild. So this variation in contaminant levels due to diet is also observed in other regions. For example, in Northeast Pacific, there's 2 different ecotypes of killer whales that are distinguished by what they feed on, and the transient ones, the ones that eat marine mammals, have much higher PCB levels compared to the ones that eat fish, called the residents. And this is also observed in Southeast Greenland killer whales compared to a population in Norway that we know feed on fish, although the variation is not as large. So we think that the killer whales moving into the Arctic in the sea ice open season are eating marine mammals and probably still eat fish, maybe when they come back down in the winter as the sea ice builds up. Truth is that their contaminant exposure is probably increasing because of these migrations north, and these levels might be toxic because they were so high. So I'm taking this research a bit further and move more into the field of toxicology and try to figure out if these contaminant levels are causing any toxic effects. And for that, I'm looking at relationships of contaminants with levels of vitamins A and E in these killer whales. Another thing to consider is also that people are starting to hunt these killer whales for food as they are becoming more abundant in the Arctic. This might have consequences to public health for indigenous communities that eat these highly contaminated killer whales. Thank you.